Yo, okay, what's up, guys? To be honest, I don't think I need to spend a whole lot of time in regards to early pronation, but me being a perfectionist, I felt that it was necessary to talk about it just a little bit. Now, early pronation, I think it gets misinterpreted because there's early pronation as a good thing, late pronation as a bad thing, and then there's early launch as a bad thing, and then there's late launch as a good thing, right? So I can see how that can kind of get confused, especially when, we're dealing with youth athletes. But the most simplistic thing that I could teach in terms of why early pronation is crucial in optimizing efficient throwing mechanics is exactly how I was taught by the individuals at the Texas Baseball Ranch, Florida Baseball Ranch, and the Texas Pitching Institute. Is when you flex your bicep and you're supinated with your hand, right? So you're flexing your bicep is engaged, contracted, and it's bulging. So now, as you pronate your hand, you're going to feel your bicep completely just chill. It's going to just disengage, right? Now, I'm still flexing, but my bicep itself relaxes. So look at the way that the hand is and the forearm works, supinated to pronated. Okay, so when we throw, it's the same concept, and this is, I think, a piece to why there's a lot of individuals that will come to you and say, my bicep hurts. I have bicep pain. Why is my bicep, whatever. And I think, and this is just from self-observation and just kind of going about this is how nerdy I am, going about the injury lists and seeing like bicep strains and then going to their delivery and mechanics and kind of seeing just this commonality. If you look at a lot of my close-up, slow-mo pitch design stuff, you can see that I'm pretty exceptional when it comes to the ability to pronate early. Coming through. Okay, so that's that release. And now watch as soon as I release this ball, right? So I stay through it. So that's how important like the tempo of the hand is in regards to getting into that slot, right? So like it's such a fine line, because when you get into the slot of release, with the fastball, you're behind the baseball. Right, you're behind the baseball. You're applying force, as much as force as you can, into the center part of the baseball, which is going to induce obviously higher ball speeds, and we can talk about like RPMs and all that stuff. Now, as soon as I come into release, this is why I have a callus, more so callus blister on my index than I do my middle, because of like this pronation aspect. And that's not to say that if you have a callus on your middle that you don't pronate on time and effectively. It's just I have to. With some more context I can give you, I had bone spur surgery in 2016, and say what you want about surgery or rehab or whatever, but anyways, I'm restricted 30 degrees of elbow extension. So like I had to reteach myself how to throw. And now you can see that I'm pronating even earlier because of that lack of elbow extension. So my shoulder takes over that pronation. But you can see in this video, since it's super 960 frames per second, how that looks in terms of when this pronation happens. Now, just because it's a fastball, doesn't mean that everything changes with a slider or a changeup or whatever. Like any pitch, you're going to see that natural pronation. All right. So the reason why you see, bicep strains or bicep soreness or whatever is, I think we're late to that pronation, and it's just a motor pattern that we need to kind of instill this more efficient pattern and get the brain to understand the movement that we're trying to program it. Okay. So what you see is at ball release, staying through it. Again, one of those more so like fine line things, because you do want to stay through the ball. But if we don't initiate that pronation on time, our bicep is going to be contracted throughout the throw, and it's going to take on more brunt force. It's going to take on more load, stress. Then the bicep is equipped to take on, right? So we want to pronate, which is going to now activate our deceleration muscles, and then we'll go into deceleration later for those guys coming from the ebook. So context, Scherzer, you can see that, boom, he gets into his slot from supination, right? So supinated, boom, gets into his slot at release on time. So his fingers are applying pressure to the baseball behind, and now boom, as soon as he releases, you see his shoulder right here. You see his shoulder start to initiate that pronation, and now his back is going to be taking on that force and that load of the deceleration, all right? And if we don't, now we're putting that stress on the bicep, which, again, bicep compared to, like, back, scap, rotator cuff, like all those things, we just want to put that load on better muscle groups that are more able to take on that stress. This is the best one I have of Chapman. It's not the greatest visual, but you can still see it. Ball release on time in his slot. And now as soon as he releases, you can see his shoulder here start to then pronate, forearm pronation. And you can see it's almost like you're putting that sword in, you know what I mean? Like, so sword into your little belt holster thing, same thing, it's boom. And that's going to be more so when we get into the deceleration pattern of it. I'll probably bring up this same video in terms of deceleration. But just to put it simply, again, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because the issue is fairly simple. Like, you look at somebody at ball release, if they're pronating late, you make the adjustment from a progressions standpoint. If they're pronating early, then they're good. If they have bicep soreness, look at their pronation. Is it happening early? Is it happening late? So on and so forth. Program football throws, and racket stuff. Like, a lot of these tools will help aid in early pronation. Bell clubs, throwing sock with a weighted ball. We'll get into that. I'll video some progressions for that. But yeah, that's what I got on early pronation. We want to pronate early, as soon as, like, you saw it, right? Like at ball release is when we're initiating pronation. Any later, our bicep is just going to take on more stress and more force that we don't. Essentially, we don't need it. We don't need to put that stress on the bicep. Give it to something else in the body, right? Okay. Hopefully that made sense. Rarely do I see this issue from a personal standpoint. Again, the experience is going to be different for everyone that works with athletes, but for me personally, maybe like 2 to 3% of the individuals that I've worked with remotely and in person have this particular breakdown. But that's not to say it's not going to happen. All right. So coming from the ebook, we'll keep moving on, and I'll program, or I'll video some progressions that we can do to instill that movement that we want. And you can see that in this chapter. And then if you're just watching this on YouTube, go buy the ebook, which hopefully should be out soon. See ya.